Kia ora everyone, and welcome back to Humankind. In today's video, I'm going to cover off science. I'm going to look particularly at two cultures in the early game that are probably best suited to a scientific run, and also cover off some other tips and tricks that all of these people can enjoy. Things like resources, geography, the wisdom legacy trait, and some early technologies to help bolster your science game. Indeed, if you start right, you will hopefully finish right. Let's jump straight in and talk science and the early game in Humankind. Now, when it comes to choosing your first culture, there is actually only one scientific culture in the ancient era. So those of you wanting to play a science game from the start, if the insane production of the Egyptians is not for you, if the incredible food production of, say, the Harappans isn't your thing, I would really recommend you choose the Babylonians. Why? Well, for the rest of the game, you'll receive +2 science per research technology on the capital, and of course, their astronomy house provides +3 science per adjacent farmer's quarter, and 1 food per researcher and 1 science per researcher on the capital. And in terms of adjacencies, it counts as both a farmer's quarter and a research quarter. This astronomy house is a very powerful way for you to up your science quickly. So at the beginning of the video here, we're going to choose the Babylonians, but stay tuned, fans of Zhou. I've got something special planned for you later. Anyway, let's jump into the Babylonians. Here you can see I've immediately picked them. Now, what do they do well? Well, firstly, you're probably going to want to settle near a river, ideally, or at least somewhere fairly productive. This +6, +18 looks like a bit of me, right? And as far as a Babylonian spawn point goes, this is pretty good indeed. So you can see here, at the beginning, I've just got my 1 city of Babylon. My empire research is a measly 3 science per turn. And for many other cultures, it will stay that way for a long time. If you don't have any uniques that are providing science, like the Babylonians, you're going to really trickle your way through the early game techs. You're not going to get them very quickly at all. If you want to progress fast, you're going to need to turn to something like this, the astronomy house. Now, in the case of Babylon, this thing is really strong if I can manage to get farmers' quarters around it. And I know that farmers' quarters obviously will do better on tiles that are already producing food to try and maximize my benefits. So for me, I'm probably looking at building some perhaps along this river, right? So I'm going to place my astronomy house down smack bang right there or there. That's going to give me at least 3 reasonable food quarters around each one. I'm going to place it here in this case because I'm hoping to connect this territory later into Babylon, so I'll be able to make use of all the tiles around it. Now, I recommend this for basically any playthrough, but I'm going to demonstrate it here for the Babylonians. I know that their district provides me with additional science per adjacent farmer's quarter, so immediately, once I've built my influence infrastructure, now I'm just going to cram some foodie ones around it here. I'm going to start with 2, and then obviously build my way out to a few more as I progress through. Now that the district is built, you can see that the game is now telling me that I will get the +3 science from building these additional ones around it, so I'll just queue up 2 more. They're not great for food, but they will get better the more of them that I build around here. So I'm just going to queue up as many as I can, in this case it's 4, and let them finish up. In terms of early game technologies, as the Babylonians, it's important that you research as many as possible. So instead of jumping ahead to something like writing, which I'll do soon probably, I'm going to hoover up these cheap technologies. They take 2 turns each for me on this speed, and they will provide me each one with an additional +2 science per turn. Picking these up quickly will help me generate more science as quickly as I possibly can. And through the magic of television, a few turns later, you can see that I've completed what I wanted to achieve here out of this Babylon start. If I turn on tile and district yields, you can see that these districts are now providing a reasonable amount of food, which will only scale over time, but crucially, my astronomy house is providing me with +12 science. That is 4 times as much as a normal city will provide, and you can see overall here in Babylon, I'm now receiving 27 science. 15 from districts, 12 thanks to my astronomy house rather, 3 from the main plaza, and then an additional 12 from my empire bonus, that brilliant philosophers. That's 2 science per tech. As a scientific culture, I do have one other trick up my sleeve. It's this: the collective mind's ability, which will convert all of my industry and money into science until I turn it off. If I really wanted to ramp things up here, now that I've got the base infrastructure in place, I could hit this ability and you can see, bam, all of my industry and money has been converted into science. I can also swap these dudes around. You can see it makes relatively little difference because at the end of the day, they are being converted into science anyway. This is by far the quickest way to make use of Babylon, right? To really push through the tech tree. If I open it up now, you can see that all of these technologies are simply going to take me one turn. I would again note that this is on blitz speed, but this will scale with any game speed that you're playing on. 55 science per turn on turn 10 is very, very strong indeed. And even if you're playing on those slower speeds, you'll find that you'll ramp into this very, very quickly. One other thing that it is worth noting here with Babylon, before I jump over to the alternative play and discuss some more generic strategies for boosting your science, is the fact that as a scientific culture, and the only scientific culture in Humankind's early game, we can research technologies one era ahead of where we begin. Why does that matter? Well, for two key reasons. Firstly, you might want to get trade expeditions quicker, to embark quicker, but secondly, we are the only culture that can get philosophy, get that research quarter online faster, get the school upgrade online faster, and the additional city cap. Of course, more cities means more unique districts, so it's really worth, once you've hoovered up a few cheap technologies, playing as Babylon, to blitzkrieg your way through writing and through into philosophy to start smashing out some research quarters, and you can get an insane science game very early on with Babylon. This is the power of the Babylonians. But as I said at the beginning, we actually have another option that might not be as straightforward as you might think. Let's have a look. I have rewound time to this decision point, where we chose the Babylonians. Fantastic scientific culture, can go nicely through into Greeks in the next era as well. But there is another choice, and it's hidden here. Here it is. Zhou. I know it's not quite pronounced Zhou. It's a long-running meme on the channel for those who haven't seen it before, but let's have a look at what Zhou offers, okay? So, they are an A-site culture. We'll discuss more on that in a bit because that is an important difference, but their unique district, the Confucian school, provides +5 science per adjacent mountain, a general benefit of 1 additional science, and a researcher's slot, and these count as research quarters as far as adjacency bonuses are concerned. Let's jump into Zhou and see what Zhou can offer us. As with last time, I'm going to choose the same rough spawn location. You can see I'm in the same map, but now I don't quite need these rivers, so I'm going to move 1 away from the river and settle here instead. Again, it's the exact same map, the exact same conditions. I'm just going to settle in a slightly different tile because I'm playing as Zhou, but still within this same territory. That is how comparable this video is going to be. However, this time, things are going to work a little bit differently. I'll evolve this city as we did last time. Great, managed to found a religion while I was at it. But crucially this time, I'm always going to pick up this infrastructure first, but then we're going to build around this, the Confucian school. It works quite differently, and it really only favors mountains. So the Babylonians are the safe, trusted, tried and true pick for a scientific beginning. However, if you have some mountains, it may be worth considering that you play as Zhou instead. Have a look at this. My school receives +5 science per adjacent mountain, and as luck would have it, I have 1, 2, 3 mountains all feeding into this one tile. This tile now will provide me with +16 science alone, and some stability as well, +10 overall. This time I'm less rewarded for picking up each and every technology, but it's more important for me that I beeline what counts, what really matters for me in this early era. Obviously, I'm going to want to have philosophy at the ready, so researching writing will be key, but by and large, when you're playing as Zhou, it's a little bit different. You might want to shoot for, say, your unique unit, or indeed bronze working. I'm going to take probably bronze working as a priority, but first and foremost, I'm likely to sweep through and grab calendar, domestication, these vital early ones, but then shoot my way through to bronze working for reasons we'll discuss in a little bit. Now, through the magic of time, let me build up to roughly where we were with the Babylonians and see what Zhou has to offer. So here we are at turn 13, again around the same place we were with the Babylonians, and take a look. My development has gone a little bit differently. I'm not incentivized by a direct adjacency bonus for my district other than mountains, so I can afford to sort of maybe get a couple of makers ones, a food one. You can see my yields are quite different. Overall, the city is producing less science, and as an empire, we are producing less science. But that doesn't mean that this is a bad thing. I've actually saved a spot here next to this district for next culture, for my next culture's district, maybe a research quarter, maybe I play as the Greeks and build it there, I'm not sure, but I've kept that spot free and overall developed a fairly reliable capital city here. Its science production is good, and indeed if I jump into the tech screen, you can see we're getting still a fairly respectable plus 19, and considering we're not even a scientific culture, that is actually very good. Now, what are the downsides and upsides to playing as Zhou in comparison to the Babylonians? Well, as I say, we're not a scientific culture, so we can't jump ahead and research things in the next era. It means I can't get philosophy as quickly, and I will definitely be at a disadvantage because of that. And that is the key disadvantage to not playing a scientific culture. Likewise, as an aesthetic culture, unfortunately, we have cultural blitz here as our ability. This allows us to bring a territory that we've settled under our control. Unfortunately, in this case, mine are already under my control, so I can't use it, and I can't use that really powerful ability of converting money and industry into science. So we miss out on that. Otherwise, though, we don't really miss out on too much else, and to be honest, some of the benefits of playing as Zhou may actually outweigh that. I note that as Zhou we receive +2 stability for all of our districts for the rest of the game. So the general penalty of -10 is effectively -8. That's really important because it'll allow us to scale much better over time. The other thing to note is that we're rewarded for our influence gain rather than our technologies. I believe this to be a significant downside of choosing Zhou over choosing a scientific culture like the Babylonians, because we'll earn our era stars likely a bit slower. That is the other downside. However, the upside is, of course, that your district can scale arguably a bit better if you have the right start, right? So here is another spot where I've built, potentially if I turn this into a city, you can see here that I can plop down another school for another +13 science here. That's reasonable. And you can do that again on repeat across all different spots in your empire. You can see here just by placing down a second city, by placing down my unique district, I have another city producing +16 science. And that means that therefore the empire-wide science has doubled. Zhou, definitely a great pick for scientific gain. However, if you can't play as the Babylonians or Zhou, what can you do to increase science in the early game? This is a wonderful Humankind question, and I'm going to answer it now. If you didn't see my recent video on the top 10 technologies to research throughout Humankind, then there are a few tips hidden in and throughout that video that you might want to incorporate, but let's focus specifically now on science, and I have 4 areas to cover off. First and foremost, it's resources. One of the reasons why I beelined bronze working is so that I can connect copper. Copper is a vital resource because it provides science. Take a look here. In my capital, as luck would have it, I have an unimproved copper tile, and you can see it's providing an innate +2 science. If I were settled near it, I would get that immediately, but thankfully I can produce this, a copper mine. Right, so we can improve this tile, instantly connecting its resources to the capital, but there's more. Not only, as you can see, we're now receiving +2 science from the copper mine, but it's also worth noting that the copper mine itself provides adjacency bonuses. So once I can get out here and build around it, I can harness even more power. And take a look at this. This territory, for example, has 3 copper mines. Taking this territory and building these, look at this, 4, 5, 6, look at them all. Expanding this way and grabbing these would be a really quick way for me to connect alone +12 science, notwithstanding the fact that I can build districts adjacent to them to build on that even more. You can see how Even if you don't get the Babylonians or Zhou, you can build an incredible science game early on through resources, and here's particularly looking at you, copper. But if you end up somewhere where copper isn't quite your thing, you can also get science from some very powerful coastal tiles. Have a look at this territory here. If I use this unit to claim an outpost right on the seaside, for example, I'm going to immediately hoover up this coastal water tile into my empire and have loads more that I can get benefit from. Look at these coral reefs. They provide an innate +3 science and +2 food. That is why when you're exploring early, before you're even in the menu where you can place down outposts, you should have your tile yields on. Because if I didn't have it on, I might not even realize that, say, for example, even these ocean tiles can provide me with a whole load of extra science. I can build resource improvements or harbors near them to help bring them into my city's sphere of influence, my zone of control, and harness all of this beautiful scientific gain that the coastal tiles are innately providing to me. Don't sleep on these ocean tiles. You can get a lot of science out of them. A lot of science indeed. And of course, we can't forget the added benefits that some of these early techs provide to our science. The one that I should really note first and foremost might be harbors. If you want to connect and get out and connect those coastal tiles into your cities, maybe you want to expand into the oceans with fishing, sailing, and later with trade expeditions. But it's also worth noting here, the first infrastructural upgrade to your science game is with writing. You can build this in your cities. It's the House of Scribes. It provides +1 science per researcher on your cities and an additional 2 slots for researchers. So if you're building up, particularly if you've gone a really heavy food and production route, things like flood irrigation, maybe you've chosen the Harappans or similar, then this will be of real benefit to you. And the one other thing you can do to benefit yourself before you progress through to the ancient era, indeed I've saved this little bonus tip to the end here, if you achieve all of your knowledge stars, that's 10 out of 10 on normal speed, you'll get this special event, a tribe's legacy, where you can choose a legacy trait to provide either +1 industry per population on cities or outposts for the rest of the game if you choose makers. You can also choose farmers to receive +1 food per population on a city or outpost, or +1 science with storytellers. This legacy trait will last with you forever. It works the exact same way that a cultural trait does for any culture in the game. And you could go with production, you could go with food, or as I say, you can go with the final one here, storytellers. You will receive +1 science per population on your cities forever. It's a great pick to boost your science in the early game, but also the picks for food and production are just as strong. This is a very powerful legacy effect that I really suggest you make the most of. In this case, I'm going to choose storytellers for that sweet, sweet science. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, the only other really early thing that you'll want to get as soon as you can make it into the classical era will be philosophy. That will allow you to build these crucial research quarters to really bolster your science, as well as the school upgrade, the second infrastructural upgrade for your cities to bolster your science even more. I hope you enjoyed this video where we sort of went through and compared Babylon to Zhou, the two science powerhouses of the early game. I think overall the Babylonians will give you a much better, more reliable scientific gain, but if you're spawning somewhere with mountains and you'd like to not only get powerful science, but also stability and other benefits moving forward, maybe Zhou might be for you. We've also covered some generic tips, everything from resources to geography, wisdom traits, and early game technologies to pick. I do hope you enjoyed this, hopefully very enjoyable Humankind video. If you did, please do consider sticking around and joining our small but growing community. And until next time, everybody, I will see you then. Take care and bye-bye.